Thank you for joining us for this week's Weird News Weekly, which is a special edition. But first, I would like to wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving from myself and Norm over there in Ohio. Weird News Weekly will be coming up right after this. Stay tuned for urban legends to ghostly tales of the paranormal, because now it's time for
Message on the Wall.
This is Message on the Wall and Lincoln's Dream. There are people who have dreams that come true, though they may be far and few between. One such person to have a dream that unfortunately did appear to have a ring of truth about it was President Abraham Lincoln. Falling asleep, Lincoln soon began a dream in which he had been woken, recounting that there seemed to be a death-like stillness around him. But then that stillness was broken by the sound of sobbing. Leaving his bedroom, Lincoln went downstairs, as every so often the pitiful sobs filtered along the corridors, going from room to room in an effort to locate where the weeping was coming from. Lincoln finally reached the East Room. There, to his surprise, he found a group of mourners, as a coffin was set with a corpse wrapped in funeral vestments. Guards were posted around the coffin as some of the mourners gazed upon the corpse whose face was covered, while others openly wept. Lincoln approached one of the guards, demanding to know who was dead in the White House, and the guard replied, "The President. He was killed by an assassin." Several days after telling his dream to his personal friend and bodyguard, Ward Hill Lamont, on April the 14th, President Lincoln attended a production of Our American Cousin, and it was there at the Ford Theatre where Abraham Lincoln was shot at close range by John Wilkes Booth. The President was taken to a house across the road from the theatre, known as the Peterson House, where he died 9 days later. The President was then set to lie in state in the East Room of the White House. You've been listening to Message on the Wall, brought to you by Paranormal X, your website for everything paranormal at www.paranormalx.yolasite.com.
The views and opinions of the host and guest of the following show may not be those of this radio network, its sponsors, or affiliates. User discretion is advised.
Welcome to
Weird News Weekly with
Diane Brown and
Norm Solbush.
Hello and welcome to another Weird News Weekly special, and this will be the third one of remembering Kennedy, Oswald and Tippitt. I'm here in Nottingham and my co-host Norm is over there in Ohio. Hi Norm.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you may be. It even could be tomorrow for you.
Yes, if you're listening on Mixcloud as well, this show will be archived.
So how are you doing today with your weather? We'll start with your weather. We have got snow here. Thank you very much.
We've had rain and torrential winds, awful winds, up to 90 miles per hour.
You know, I've seen that. You guys are so used to the high 90 miles an hour here would be an actual hurricane or a tornado. I thought I was not understanding some people saying, well, it's 90 mile an hour winds outside. I go, no, it can't be 90 mile an hour. Maybe they're talking different kind of measurement, you know.
No.
It's 90 miles an hour.
Yeah, we've had them 120 mile an hour. Roofs disappear and trees come down, and it's more in the south towards that they get that, and it usually comes at least once a year.
So I would definitely build a brick ranch house in England or a castle out of brick or rock. I would not use vinyl siding, would I?
No, most of our houses are brick.
You'd almost have to have brick over there. You can't even build like a stick building and put wood siding or even, we used to have aluminum siding here, but vinyl siding is pretty common here, even in modern homes. They got different types, but it just shakes in the wind here, 50 mile an hour. It would blow off the house over there.
Well, we do have wood panelling, but that's Elizabethan. If you look at the Elizabethan houses, you've got the black wood panelling against the white background.
Do they do special stuff to the roof system over there? I mean, we have hurricane straps and stuff like down in Florida because they get hurricane season, and houses have to be built to a certain spec so the roof just doesn't pick up and fly away.
No, even flooding areas, they just live with it.
Wow.
Pay top insurance and keep everything that's of any real value upstairs.
Okay, so today we're going to talk about the third leg of this series on the Kennedy assassination. I'll let you start today.
Well, on Sunday, of course, they had the yearly vigil at the place where John F. Kennedy was shot on the 22nd of December 1963. And it wasn't just John Kennedy who died. It was a police officer named JD Tippitt, who was a patrolman.
That was November 22nd.
That was about 45 minutes after John F. Kennedy was assassinated. And then on the 24th, on the Sunday, Lee Harvey Oswald was shot by Jack Ruby, which has set off this whole scenario of people coming up with different theories of who actually killed Kennedy, other than it being Lee Harvey Oswald. It depends on your source. On the low side, it's 75% of Americans believe that there was a conspiracy, and then you can back off it again to say that they didn't believe that Lee Harvey Oswald had any connection to the killing at all.
So just to clarify here, we hear about conspiracy theories everywhere nowadays. It's becoming more and more common. 9/11, there's conspiracy theories there. Anything else throughout the years, I've always said there's possible conspiracy about the moon landing. I mean, everybody talks about UFOs, the conspiracies with that. Why is this particular story different? I mean, I know it was back in the 60s, but why do people believe there could be a conspiracy? Is I guess what I'm asking.
Because there was no conclusion. Lee Harvey Oswald couldn't put his case forward because he was shot to keep him silent. So there was no conclusion, and people were told, if they went off the theme that there was more than one gunman, he was harassed by police and FBI, and at least 150 people, witnesses and people that have claimed that they know who shot Kennedy, mysteriously died. A lot of people, it's been suicide. Keenan last week said, show me the proof, when I said a man was shot in the back of the head. Well, there was two men actually that were shot behind the back of their ear, and they was brought in as suicide.
It just seems like every year this goes on and on and on. Some people probably don't even remember, weren't even born when this happened. We see all kinds of testimony about this Tippitt. Some people might think that he was just shot to make it look good. Some people might think he shouldn't have died, shouldn't have even been shot. So in your findings, what really happened here?
Well, we didn't really talk about JD Tippitt that much, which I really wanted to. That's why we're doing this third show. And he was called JD. Some people say he was called Jefferson Davis, but his parents actually called him JD. That's all. There was no name. And strangely enough, even for Oswald dying on 24th, all three of them was buried on the 25th. And it actually was John Kennedy Jr.'s third birthday.
And that's another show. He was a good guy. The other show I'm talking about is The Life and Death of Him. That was kind of a ironic scenario, too.
Well, they call it the Kennedy curse, don't they?
It's kind of sad, actually. I like the guy. I think he could have ran for president.
Oh, yeah, but would he have got there?
Yeah,
They'll have them in the Senate, but they won't have them as president.
right.
Jackie Kennedy, she did have her doubts, and she went to the French and she asked them if they would do an investigation. They told her that Lyndon B. Johnson had instigated the murder, which her and Bobby always thought they had anyway. And the Russians were the same. There was a conspiracy after the fact. That's been proven because Lyndon B. Johnson, he had all his phone calls taped, and he was actually talking about, we've got to keep this down, it's got to be a single gunman. And people covered for this because they thought they was doing the right thing. Johnson was always saying to him, well, it was Castro that did this and the Russians. If we say that, the people of America will want us to do something about it, and then we're going to go into World War III. We've got to say that it was a lone gunman to stop World War III, and that's how he got round people, and that's why so many people kept their mouths shut.
Wow. Wow, that's pretty deep, really. World War III. And that's another term used every day nowadays. People think we're headed for that now, in today's time, in 2016.
Russia lost out when Kennedy was killed because he was talking with them. There could have even been a partnership going to the moon, because Kennedy's on tape where he's saying, I don't care about space. Why are we spending all this money looking into space? He didn't care about getting to the moon before the Russians.
Right, he saw it as a waste of money.
Yes, he did.
Now, whether or not that's an open mind on the future, when you're back in the 60s looking forward, I mean, you got to remember, this was before computers, this was before cell phones. This is way back in everyday life in America in the 60s, but I guess it was just considered to be normal. But things have really changed since 63,
Yeah.
or even the 60s, 1960 even.
Well, things were changed by Lyndon B. Johnson. Kennedy was pulling out the troops that he had sent as advisories. They were not meant to fight a war, and the army was getting involved with some of the skirmishes and battles, and he was losing people, and they was only meant to be there to advise. It's the same as the Cuban Bay of Pigs. He was told, we'll help the Cubans, we'll supply them with arms, and he was all for helping a country if they're going to help themselves. And he was told, oh, when these people arrive at the Bay of Pigs and these people have got guns, there's going to be an uprising against Castro, which didn't happen. If he'd have sent in the Air Force like they wanted him to, Russia and America would have been at war.
Correct.
Because Russia could not be seen to have an ally and then desert them.
All this stuff's going on. You ask yourself in the back of your mind, I don't know if you do, but I kind of do, and I'm American. Where were the American people and the public back in those days? Did they just follow the story that CBS and them reporters back in those days in the media? I mean, who'd we have? Walter Cronkite? Is that why he was so liked? Because he was like part of the family, and nobody would ever think Walter Cronkite would lie to them. But was Walter Cronkite's stories on all of this while it was happening, was it accurate? Apparently not.
No,
But
because he said that Kennedy had gone forward when actual fact it was sort of looking down at, because he'd been shot in the throat, and he was already looking down, and when the gun blasted him, his head went back. Now, they found out that some of the frames in that film, the Zapruder film, have been removed.
do you think Walter Cronkite thought he was actually reporting on the truth at the time?
I think he did, yes.
So the American public were duped, and so was the reporter, who was very well seen as a godfather on the TV set. Oh, then the tears came, and people were upset, and how can this happen? And Nobody back in those days ever doubted that this could have been a conspiracy?
Less than a week after, yes, people were talking. People were saying something isn't right. The FBI were taking films. There was another film taken. You can see her in the Zapruder film. She's taking a film, and that film was taken from her, and she hasn't seen it since. It's exactly the same with Bobby Kennedy. There was somebody behind him taking photographs. The photographs were taken. They said that they were sealed for so long. When he went to get them, after they were supposed to be unsealed, they disappeared.
So, is the family of this police officer still around?
Yes, his widow is still alive. He had 3 children. One recently died from lung cancer. He was in the army. It was parachute regiment, and he only did one drop, and that was in Germany during World War II. And he came back with post-traumatic syndrome. So they said he wouldn't have made a very good police officer because he couldn't look people in the eye. And he was in the police force for 11 years, and he wasn't promoted at all. He remained a patrolman. But it was strange because he had 2 houses. Him and his wife bought a house, and then instead of selling it, they bought another house and rented that one out. And so he got 2 other jobs. He was moonlighting.
Did the wife remarry?
Yes, she did. She remarried about 3 years later. She married her police officer.
Kind of wonder, has anybody ever interviewed her?
Oh yeah, she has reverted back to the name of Tippitt. She married twice actually. When I can find my notes.
So I'm sure that somebody investigated if there was any discrepancies or derelict of duty. That JD was a pretty normal cop, right? I mean, he wasn't into any involvement, do you think, with the loss of his own life? I mean, I'm sure people wouldn't know if they were going to die or not, but was he involved with some of these conspirators?
Thing was, when he was on duty, his wife said that he went home for his lunch. Well, another police officer said they had coffee at about the same time. So there's discrepancy there. I mean, the police officer could have made a mistake, and it could have been another day when they had coffee. But he came back on duty at 11:50 a.m. and that it was clear. And it was seen parked up watching traffic go past as if he was looking for something. He then went to the area where Lee Harvey Oswald was, he was in lodgings, and he went in that area. Well, that isn't his beat actually, and he wasn't told to go into that area. Although later they said that, well, he was covering for officers that had left the area to go and be at Dealey Plaza and around that area. But people seemed to think he was looking for somebody. He went into a shop and asked if he could use the phone, Top 10 Records. Well, he'd used the phone before, so they didn't think anything strange about it, but he seemed to be a bit agitated, and he dialed a number, and he listened for a couple of minutes, and he never spoke, and they think that whoever he called didn't answer. And he more or less ran out of the shop, jumped into his car and sped off. And he sped off into the direction in the area where Jack Ruby lived. He was seen round there. But the next thing, he was cruising as if he was looking for somebody. And he got to the corner of 10th Street and Patton Avenue, and this man was seen going to his car, and he actually put his hands on the car and was leaning into the car and talking to Tippitt. And then Tippitt got out of the car and came round the front of the car, and he was already drawing his gun when he was shot 3 times in the chest. Well, other people said they'd seen the shooter, but it was a different bullet of when this man walked up to him and shot him in the head, like mafia assassination. But they did take fingerprints of Tippitt's car. There's footage of them doing that. But they never came out and said Lee Harvey Oswald's prints were on his car. All the evidence from that, all the forensic evidence that was taken, has disappeared.
Wow. So, well, I was reading where the Dallas police and the FBI discovered Oswald prints on some of the cartons and on the rifle, but the evidence turned out not to shed any light on the question whether or not he was guilty of the assassination.
They did a paraffin test on him. It was known to be a very corrupt police force in Dallas, and one of the best things they could have done was do a paraffin test, and it showed them that he hadn't shot a gun that day, so he couldn't have shot Tippitt, and he'd got no residue which you would have had from a rifle on his cheeks. They did both his cheeks and his hands, and it proved that he hadn't shot a gun that day.
You know, they call that something different nowadays, with a gun residue test or something.
Yeah. They think that Oswald left the building after the shooting. He probably didn't know that the president was dead at that time. He went to his house where he lived and picked up a gun and a shoebox lid and a few other things which were quite strange. He had a magic wallet. His wallet was found near to Tippitt's body.
Was that a little too convenient?
Well, his wallet was also found at his rooming house, and when he was arrested, he had it in his back pocket.
Okay, so how many wallets does this guy got?
Oh, he must have had 3.
This guy must have been all the government money they paid him. He had to have 3 or 4 wallets. They paid him in cash.
I mean, that was a day when you had one wallet, isn't it?
Well, wallets, I grew up when, I was 4 years old when this whole thing took place. And all I remember as a child was my mom crying. She's a devout Catholic. And I remember seeing the black and white, I still see it, the black and white image of the casket being in that cart with the horse. And I can still hear them click-clacks of them, the horse's feet.
Well, it was a drum, actually. There was a drum, and it
Well,
was...
yeah, there was a drum, but I mean, I heard I don't know if they had a microphone on the street low or back in those days, who knows what they were listening to, but I remember everybody's kids watch that. I mean, it took forever I don't know how long actually that funeral took, but or how much was on TV here back then, but I remember it seemed like for hours we sat there and watched. Because I remember us complaining to Mom, is this still on? When are they going to get there? You know, it's like, what's this casket doing? I mean, we were just young kids. My sister was a little older, so she might have been a little more onto it back then. But
a lot of people came from out of town, even from Canada, to John Kennedy's funeral. But JD Tippitt, his children were Charles Allen, called Allen. He was 13 at the time. And then there was 12-year-old Brenda, and then Curtis, who was 7. And Brenda and Curtis are the ones that are still alive.
Have any of them wrote a book or their side of the story, or do they not remember it? Or
they don't really remember much about it. The eldest remembered more. It did affect him. He was playing hooky from school that day, pretended he had a stomachache to get out of an exam. This is something that will never probably happen again, or hopefully won't. He heard on the radio that a police officer had been shot and that his name was Tippitt. And he went and got his mum, and that's how they found out that he'd died on the radio before the police got there.
Crazy.
And his wife, Marie Tippitt, she married Lieutenant Harry Thomas until his death in 1982. Then she married Carl Flinner, which ended in divorce, and then she, of course, resumed back to the name Tippitt.
So I'm going to throw this out there. There was a possible assassination, maybe attempt in Chicago in that October.
Yes. Well, the FBI actually had a wiretap on these mafia men, and they were actually talking about Kennedy being killed in Florida. But then it moved to Chicago, and somebody called Lee called in to the FBI and told them that there was going to be gunmen waiting in position for Kennedy, and that was cancelled.
I guess what I'm trying to think here is some reason it got moved out of Chicago. Apparently it was to be there and in Florida. Something must have happened to change those plans, which I don't know if you've ever checked out, but could this just have been a thrown together fast assassination in Dallas? Is that why everything's kind of screwed up here?
I think Dallas was more easily to control. The authorities would not want a president killing in their state. The security would have been a lot higher. It would have been much harder. Whereas in Dallas, they actually changed the route. So Lee Harvey Oswald shouldn't have known that he was going down onto Dealey Plaza. He should have shot him as he was coming up towards the book depository, and that would have been a clear aim for him and an easier hit to just kill Kennedy as he was coming towards him, not going away from him.
All right.
Because he wasn't meant to go down there, really. And if you notice, if you see the video of Kennedy driving through, crowds were pretty thick. You got them like 3 and 4 layers deep on either side of the road. Then they come round the corner, they have to slow down, come down the corner onto Elm Street and down towards the grassy knoll. Where's all the people? There's about 50 people scattered and stood on the bridge. Because people said that they was going to go down onto the grassy knoll, and the police were making them go back round the corner.
So somebody knew something, bottom line.
Oh, yes.
So you had to have your police department, at least some of the high-ranking officials involved, whether it was the chief or not, or the mayor. Come on now, though, if you think about it, Diane. Somebody approached me at a job of being a police chief saying that we're going to kill the president. Don't you think that somebody would have stopped it or said something to other people? Or I guess maybe nobody knew how deep it went.
You know, Lyndon B. Johnson had a lot to lose. He was a man in Texas. He was a man in Dallas. He got a lot of people in his pocket, and he got to be vice president. He actually blackmailed John F. Kennedy. He had asked someone else to be president, and he was writing his acceptance speech, and Lyndon B. Johnson and another man went to Kennedy and they said, we've got this, and it was his sexual exploits that had been gathered together by the FBI. It was a neighbour of Herbert Hoover, who was the head of the FBI, and Lyndon B. Johnson found out that they was looking into things because his businesses were crooked. Everything he did was it was illegal activity, and the following week he would have been arrested and charged with a lot of his activities. Whereas when he became president, all that was dropped. They just dropped it. How can you arrest a president? Hoover had a lot to lose as well, because he was getting to that age where it was mandatory retirement. Well, when Lyndon B. Johnson got in power and became president, he gave Hoover the job for life. So he was still a director of the FBI up to him dying.
When I think back or try to adjust my mind to killing the president and how many people may have been involved behind the scenes at any level, how the heck does that happen?
There was a lot of hate. They encouraged the hate.
But then your average American, like my mother, would see the President Kennedy was the best president we ever had.
Oh, he was the best president you ever had. But, you know, there's a DJ here called John Peel. He said, I was in Dallas on the 22nd of November, and he was at a university, and when the news came through that John F. Kennedy had been shot and that he was dead, he said some of these students actually cheered.
I guess I look at the American public, even if you want to try to convert it to today's times, If the American public is real happy about a president, apparently that president is really upsetting the inside things going on or the big picture of things going on. And maybe the government isn't for the people like we all believe it is.
Of course it's not. They get in there for themselves.
Well, it's pretty obvious today. I understand that. But back in those days, the American attitude was very, very pro-American. I mean, if you were a boy growing up, you went to war. It didn't matter. You didn't have a choice to agree or disagree. If there was a war and your draft was on, or you could volunteer, whenever that did actually start, the volunteering part, and you weren't drafted and you wanted to go, you just went down and you signed up. You know why? Because it's your duty. It wasn't, I don't buy that, what Kennedy says, I'm not going. That was a very slim chance that any American 18, 19, 20-year-old would ever say something like that. Because the way they were raised, their fathers were very, very devout Americans, and this is what you do. This is what is expected of you.
Oh, I'm sure it happened there as it did here, where young boys underage actually signed on to go in the army because they felt that they were going to be doing something for the country.
Their job wasn't to question the executive branch. Their job was, he was elected president, he's our president, he was respected as our president, which we don't have that respect here anymore, I might add. Most of the time in the older days, when I say that, I'm in the 60s, 70s, I don't know what happened, and then it just continued off tilt. But there was time in this country, in America, you were basically expected to take care of the women and children and anybody outside the realm of the United States if our president said, we're going to war. And you didn't question that, Diane.
No.
Nobody questioned that. Sure, there was probably some of your radicals that we don't talk about. There probably was. I've never really looked back at it, but I'm sure there was some radicals out there. I mean, we had a black and white thing going on with a race problem in this country back then, and things were pretty ugly in the home front, but nobody talked about it. But to actually kill a president, them types of people, no matter who they were, like I said, how did they ever come to terms that it was the right thing to do, or that they were doing something right in their viewpoint is just beyond me.
Well, he just made a lot of enemies. We've talked about this before, Oswald. When he was in New Orleans, whether they were setting him up to be patsy then or not, but I do believe they were hoping to send him to Cuba to kill Castro. So, he had to get in and pretend to be pro-Castro, and he was handing out leaflets that said, hands off Cuba committee. But he wouldn't say how many members there were. He was basically the front. And the leaflets that he first handed out had an address on, and it was a CIA address. The CIA was actually in this office, and that's where he was working from. And he was quickly told not to put the address on the leaflets. But there was a little rubber stamped with this address. And he had been to anti-Castro meetings, and this man saw him handing out pro-Castro leaflets, and they got fighting. And Lee Harvey Oswald was arrested, and this got in the news, and they took cameras down there and filmed him handing out leaflets with another man, and they invited him onto a show, and all went very nice, and he was talking about things, and he very well educated, he could hold his own. And then they invited him back with this other gentleman that he'd had a fight with, and they put him quite through the ringer, and they mentioned something, and he said, oh, the defunct CIA. And they jumped on that. What do you mean the defunct CIA? Well, he says that Alan Dulles has been sacked, so they're not really in any position. But that is what the Kennedys were going to do. They was going to disband the CIA.
You don't happen to know what Bill and Hillary Clinton were doing back when this was happening, do you?
I don't know, but they might have been in Dallas.
I mean, you think about stuff like this and you start putting two to two together. Where did the Clintons learn the bad stuff they've done, or been alleged of doing? Maybe they knew some of these people.
It's highly possible that they did, yes. George Bush, of course, he became president and then became head of CIA and said up to that point he'd never had anything to do with CIA, and yet there's someone called Bush mentioned, and they do believe that he was in Dallas
Really?
that day as well, yes. There's pictures, and there's a picture of him and he looks very much like George Bush.
Has he ever talked about that anywhere?
He can't remember where he was.
Oh, really?
Nixon couldn't remember where he was. He was in New York and then he was somewhere else. And I mean, how can you forget where you were when something like that happens?
And I could tell you exactly the color of carpeting that I was laying on when I was watching his funeral. You know what I mean? Some things just stick in your mind.
Yes, especially something like that. Getting back to Tippitt, it's believed that Lee Harvey Oswald went back to his rooming house and possibly got a lift to the Texas theatre where he was arrested. Somebody put him down as getting there at just gone one.
Who arrested him? Local police, or was it the feds?
Well, it was a bit of both. When it was announced that a cop had been gunned, there was more activity than there was for the president. And about 13 cars turned up. Got to go through my notes again. There was so many witnesses, and half of them were very well rehearsed and all gave the same description of Oswald, while the other half gave a different description of a short, stocky man, which sounds more like Jack Ruby to me.
Yeah.
And it wasn't far from where he lived either. One of the witnesses knew Tippitt quite well because she'd seen him in the area so often she thought he actually lived on the street. But actually his mistress lived on the street.
Ah. These mistresses were sure seeing a lot of partying back in those days.
Yes, everybody had a mistress, and his mistress said that his wife was going to divorce him. Somebody else said that he was going to ask his wife for a divorce. She was married and her husband was actually stalking them. So he was also in line for it could have been him. But Domingo Benavides was the nearest witness. He said he saw him being shot and he waited until the gunman had left before he went up to Tippitt because he didn't want to get shot himself. And he tried to use the radio to tell him that a cop was down and he wasn't getting through. And this other gentleman stopped. He drove up to the scene and he saw Tippitt's body laying in the road, and he went up to him to see if he could assist. Saw he was dead, saw that the man wasn't getting through on the radio, and he knew how to do the radio, so he reported it in and they told him to keep off the radio. Well, two of the witnesses, they basically followed this gunman to this house where it was like a museum or a storehouse, and the police went there and they found a jacket which they later said was Oswald's, even though it wasn't his size, it was a size too big. And there was also witnesses that said that a gunman had gone into the church and they surrounded the church. There was also some of them on the way to a library where they said that someone suspicious had entered a library, but they surrounded this church, but they didn't go in. And when it came through that they'd arrested somebody at the Texas Theatre, they all took off down there, and nobody went into the church to check it out or anything.
Nobody.
Nobody went into the church.
Well, maybe it was considered sacred back in those days. Churches' doors were always open, weren't they? At least I thought they were.
Yeah, most churches were open at that time. You could go in any time. Not in this day and age, unfortunately. But they all then descended on the Texas Theatre and quite a crowd had gathered. And they went in, and the police and the FBI were actually walking up the aisle from the front of the theatre, and Oswald was sat 3 rows from the back, and he didn't offer to get up, run or anything. He just sat there. Now, I think they wanted him to run.
Yeah.
And a police officer came in, and then I think he wasn't in on it, and they had to arrest him. But I believe the same as a lot of these people that have done a lot of research on it, that JD Tippitt and another officer were actually looking for Lee Harvey Oswald before his description went out, and that he was meant to kill him. And I think he lost his quarry, and that's why he was racing round looking for him. He was expecting to find him walking from his place to wherever he was meant to be going. But, you know, there's always, oh, well, Lee Harvey Oswald ran from work. He left work. He ran from work. Well, he actually walked out and left. And they did a roll call at the end, and 48 people was missing.
48 people.
48 people was missing, and it was confirmed that Lee Harvey Oswald and other people were told that there would be no more work that day. You're not going to hang around when you're told there's no more work that day.
Right, right. It's crazy things you find out by researching it.
Yes, there is plenty there as well. Got that many notes. I should have put my little cards instead of sticking them all in one big pad.
Yeah.
But there was 2 people arrested at the Texas theatre. Lee Harvey Oswald was supposedly the one that was brought out the front. And there's about 1,000 people there by this time. And they were shouting, "Hang him." And they bundled him in the car. And another one that they said looked like Lee Harvey Oswald was arrested and taken out the back and later released. And another Lee Harvey Oswald lookalike was also arrested at Fort Worth, which was 22-year-old Donald House, who was a ranger, and he looked very much like Lee Harvey Oswald, but he was much shorter. He was about 4 inches shorter. But basically, they was arresting anybody that looked like Oswald.
Yeah. Just arrest him.
Yeah.
Wonder how those suspects were treated.
There was links between Lee Harvey Oswald and Jack Ruby, who shot him, and they're trying to say that there was no links, but they was seen out eating together. And also Lee Harvey Oswald was seen in this diner, which JD Tippitt was also seen in. They were seen eating, not together, but in the same diner.
Yeah.
Which was very close to where Lee Harvey Oswald was boarding. So it was typical that he would go there, but not Tippitt. It was about 16 minutes out of his patrol area. So was he casing him prior to that?
Yeah, yeah. Very well could have. I don't know. I mean, things were pretty much cut and dry the way people said it back in those days, you know. It was, you know, everybody assumes, especially back that many years ago, that, well, they must have the right guy, or this is what happened, and they try to tell you the story of how it happened, and I guess you tend to believe it if you believe they did an investigation. The public would go, well, okay. I mean, nobody even questions them anymore, do they?
No.
I mean, authority kind of people. They just say, well, and then you're considered.
There's a lot of innocent people in jail. I mean, I still have problems with Jim Lavelle as well, because he was the man in the white hat, you know, that came out with Lee Harvey Oswald, and he was handcuffed to him when he was shot. I don't know if this is true or not, but he said to him, if anybody's going to shoot you, I hope they're as good a shot as you. He says, meaning that they'd get him and not me. And he says, oh, he laughed and said, oh, nobody's going to shoot me. And then they came out and walked it down. Now, Jim Lavelle said he saw the gun and he was cuffed to Lee Harvey Oswald, and he tried to pull him back around him. Well, if you watch that footage, Jim Lavelle wasn't even looking in that direction. For some unknown reason, he was looking to his right all the time. He was cuffed by his left hand to Lee Harvey Oswald, and he was looking to his right. Why was it? I can't understand why he was looking to his right. If he thought somebody could shoot him, why wasn't he more vigilant and looking around? It was like he was deliberately turning his head away from him. He turned his head when that shot went off. That's when he saw the gun.
Did something happen that we didn't see on camera that he was looking at that made his attention look the other way?
But he said he saw the gun and he tried to pull Oswald back and behind him, and the gun went off. Well, that is not true to what is seen on the video.
Is there more of that video?
I don't think so, because everybody crowded round, so he wouldn't see much after that, and they took him to a room for about 11 minutes and questioned him and tried to get him to say that he had killed the president and that he'd killed Tippitt before the ambulance took him away.
Was that a news camera?
Yes.
Probably
Everybody was there that shouldn't have been there.
Right. It should have been a protected area.
Yes.
Wonder why it wasn't.
They let the news people have a lot of access to him. He was brought out to the media, and then he was taken away again quite quickly. But Jack Ruby was there, and he said he had a gun in his pocket. It was there in the corridor. I think if Oswald had said something that he shouldn't have, he would have quickly shot him there.
I remember that face. I don't know what I'm thinking of in my head, but there was a thing that was put on the news all the time of a picture, a still shot of the moment he was shot. He was making a face.
Well, he was in pain.
Well, yeah, but it was somebody caught that instantly, you know.
It's a still from the video.
Okay. It's funny how you remember just certain images. I mean, that was plastered over the entire world forever, that picture.
Mm-hmm. There's a nice picture of Bobby and Lyndon B. Johnson, and Bobby stood looking up at Johnson, and Johnson looks ashen even though it's a black and white picture, and this came from Mrs. Lincoln, that was John F. Kennedy's secretary. She said Bobby went up to him and said, why did you have my brother killed? And then somebody took a photograph. And yes, Lyndon B. Johnson was shocked that he should actually come to him and say that to him.
Yeah.
That he was going to reopen the case when he became president. And they couldn't allow him to do that because there was too many people involved.
So the actual findings, this thing's closed, correct? All this investigative government investigation is done, correct? It has been, right?
Yes, it was reopened, but people started dying. People die every time they open up the case.
Yeah, sounds like a Clinton. If you know a Clinton, you might die too. I mean, that's probably where they got that from.
Yes.
That's what's scary about the Clintons. People don't realize if you look up Bill Clinton and Hillary, look at their life and their past of where they were when he was governor. Look at how many people in the area of Arkansas that died for some odd reasons.
It's only a small place.
You know, you wonder if all this kind of activity is somehow linked even to this Kennedy assassination.
Well, it could very well be, yeah. Got away with it, didn't they?
Sure they did.
They're still getting away with it.
There's so much going on, Diane. I don't even want to know where to start. I don't know who's included, who's not. I don't know what's going on anymore in the world. You know, nobody seems to tell the truth anymore. Everybody wants to tell a lie. Everybody has their own power. It's amazing how much power can change a person.
Oh, yeah.
No matter what you're involved with, power is just like an addictive drug.
It is, yes. And they just want to keep it, don't they?
Yeah, show off.
That's why they keep all their pensions and everything, even though they've finished the stint and retired, and health insurance.
Yeah. It goes on and on and on and on. We could do a 24/7 show and never stop of what goes on every day. Can't do anything right. We can't even investigate a murder of a president, assassination of a president, and even to this day, we have all of this stories and all these findings and all this information that was very pertinent back in the day that was never possibly looked at.
Yep. And some of the evidence has been sealed.
Isn't that supposed to be unsealed pretty soon?
75 years, so you've got another 22 left.
Well, before we die, maybe we'll know some of the truth.
Well, somebody will eventually know. I think that's why people have got to keep asking questions, because, when it's time to unseal them, if nobody asks for them to be unsealed, they probably won't.
Yep, and it's all linked even with the Marilyn Monroe.
So they say, yes.
I mean, everything is linked. Everything is linked somehow. Everything. I mean, Cuba, Russia, Marilyn Monroe, the Kennedys, Jack Ruby, the elected officials back in the days.
Well, they said that he shot Oswald to save Jackie Kennedy from coming back to Dallas for a trial and everything, but that would have given conclusion to people, including Jackie. And he then later said, people won't allow me to tell the truth and what I know. And they said, is it somebody big? He says, look to the top, which meant Lyndon B. Johnson.
What was the first thing Lyndon B. Johnson did as president? I don't know. But
He didn't have to, but he got on Air Force One and he got sworn in as president, and he insisted that Jackie be there by his side, and they wanted her to get changed, and she said, no, let them see what they have done to my husband. Let them see. She went to the French, and she asked them to do an investigation, and they came back and told her that the instigator was Lyndon B. Johnson. And the Russians also did their own investigation, and they said they looked at who had the most to gain, and it was Lyndon B. Johnson. Khrushchev, when he heard the news that Kennedy died, cried.
yeah, a lot of people cried. I think our country was on its knees back in those days when that happened.
Well, it certainly was shortly after, but, a lot of people made money on the war.
Yeah.
He did help racial tensions and things, but that was from Kennedy, and it got passed because Kennedy died. Kennedy couldn't get it passed.
Right.
Once he died, they did it in his memory.
Very interesting topic today, Diane.
It certainly has been, yes.
And I know you did a lot of research on this, and you had a lot of good guests over the series of 3 shows, and thanks to them, I think some of them even have public speaking engagements.
Yes, I've been in Dallas. Peter Dale Scott, I'd like to thank him. He was in Dallas doing talks and things. And of course, I tried to get Judith Very Baker, but she's very busy at the moment, book signing.
So let's just end it this way. Give me your opinion, and we'll close the show, of the Warren Commission's report. I mean, was that just a setup?
Oh, I think it was definitely a setup. I mean, Lyndon B. Johnson told them, come back and tell me that it was a lone assassin. And when they thought there was 3 bullets, but when one of them was found to be in the side of the road on a curbstone, which the police had cut out and taken, they then had to make only 2 of the bullets reach the car. I don't know if you've seen the video. It shows you where the bullet went through Kennedy and Conley to hit Conley in 3 different places.
I've heard about the magic bullet. I didn't actually look at the video. I will do that, though. It is kind of crazy. I've heard both sides. I've heard people say that bullets do crazy things. I've heard people say it's a bunch of malarkey. It didn't happen that way.
Well, once it cracks a rib, it slows down. So It's not exactly going to go through a wrist and then into your thigh.
There's been studies and computer analyzations of that. I remember somebody put it on a computer and came up with hundreds of different ways it could have happened, and not one of those ways was the way that it's for it to happen.
And of course Lyndon B. Johnson got involved, and Connolly's clothing and everything. Would he ever want to wear it again? I mean, if you were shot, would you really want to be wearing the same clothes? But Lyndon B. Johnson said, get that man's clothes to the cleaners, and he cleaned them and had them laundered and everything.
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense. That should have been put in a bag at least and saved. Well, at least nowadays we would say that. I don't know what they were thinking, you know.
There was forensics at that time. He had the car cleaned as well.
Yeah, see, there was something being hidden. I guess you have to look at it that way.
Conspiracy after the fact, at least.
Shame on everyone involved. Kind of wonder what this country would be like if he never died.
Oh.
Well, I don't know if it would be good or bad, but
There'd have been no Vietnam War. The Cold War would have ended. You'd probably be friends with Cuba, and a Russian would have planted the flag on the moon next to an American.
yeah.
Oh, and you'd have had your own money.
Yeah. If he didn't die, would we still have? We wouldn't have had the Kennedy silver $50.
Probably would. Bobby as well. Bobby dollar.
Yeah.
Or Bobby $50. Well, Tippitt topped the shows, and I hope you've enjoyed listening to them and giving our views and our guests' views.
All right. Well, I think today's show's over, and appreciate everybody. We need some Facebook people on Weird News Weekly. We're about 70 short of being 1,000. We would appreciate it. Just go to Facebook and like us. If you never want to come back and read anything after that, that's fine with me. But just like us.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for listening. This is our last show for November, so we'll be getting into the December Christmas shows, and I'll be looking at unusual Christmas gifts as usual. No one won't be with us next week, unfortunately. He's off enjoying himself in a cabin.
As you would call it, Norm's on holiday.
Norm is on vacation.
And show up the next show there, people, because you've got one special guest coming on, and it should be a fun show.
Yes, it should, and it will be.
See everybody later.
Yes, thank you for listening. We will be back same time, same place next week, so take care till then.
na 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 na